Hey, beautiful women of purpose. I want to talk to you today about something that happens at a very specific moment in your calling journey. And it's not at the beginning when you're still asking, is this God, right? We know that's behind us now. But I'm talking about what happens after you have told God yes, after you know that it is Him speaking to you. Because somewhere between sensing the pull and saying yes to it, I'm assuming that you have now made a decision. And maybe you said it out loud, maybe you said it in prayer, maybe you just started moving. You wrote something down, you made a plan, you looked something up, and you told one person. And then something shifted from thinking about it to actually doing something about it. And when you stepped into that yes, you expected something, didn't you? Maybe you expected to feel settled, like, the uncertainty would lift and the path would start to reveal itself a lot more clearer. Maybe you expected momentum, like one step would make the next step obvious. Or maybe you expected some sort of confirmation from God that would meet your obedience and say yes, like this is it, like you heard me right, daughter, keep going. But instead, what happened? Well, you're moving and you're still waiting. You're doing and you're still wondering. You took the step and clarity that you expected hasn't fully came as yet. And now you're standing in this in between space and you're asking questions you didn't expect to be asking after you've already said yes to God. You're asking something like, is this what it's supposed to feel like, God? If that's where you are, I want you to stay with me because today I want to give you something that, you probably haven't received as of yet. The language for what you have been experiencing on the inside. I want you to think about that, okay? Because you've been living it. You just haven't had the words for it. And my sister, you deserve to have the words to understand what you are going through. Hi, and welcome to the Purpose and Calling Show. I'm Teresa V. Smithen-Quintana, and this is a space where we do the real work of walking out your God-given calling. Not the surface level version, but the real process, the journey. So the honest, sometimes uncomfortable, but deeply necessary work. If you are new here, welcome. I am so glad that you have found this place. And if you've been walking with me through this series, welcome back. We've been in a conversation called The Pull. And here's where we've been. So, week 1, we asked, is this really God? And then in week 2, we asked, what if it actually is? And then today for week 3, we're going to be talking about what does this actually feel like in the process. Because here's what I want you to hold on to before we even get started. This journey, listen, it is a process. It is not a destination. It is not a singular moment. And sometimes understanding the process changes the way you walk through it. I say that all the time. And that's what today it's about, the process, okay? So let's go. So let me name what I think is actually happening for you right now. And I want to be specific, not general, because I know, you've probably heard a lot of general stuff before. So here we go. You've said yes, and that's significant. And you're not still asking whether it's God. You've already settled that. You're either already moving, you're taking steps, you're making plans, you're doing something, or you're in the process of sizing up what, saying yes is actually going to cost you. Either way, the decision has been made internally. You've already made it internally. And somewhere in that movement, in the doing or the planning or the counting of the cost, you have hit something that you weren't prepared for. It's not what you expected. And tell me if I'm wrong, but you expected that once you said yes, things would get clearer. that the direction would sharpen, that you would feel a kind of confirmation underneath each step, a sense of rightness, of alignment, of God saying, yes, daughter, this is it, keep going. You know, you expected your yes to feel like arrival. But what you're actually experiencing is more like this. You're moving, but you're not sure. You're moving in the exact right direction. You know, you're doing something, but you're not sure if it's the right something. You're excited and you're determined, and you're also overwhelmed and uncertain about the specifics. And some days the pull feels strong and clear, and other days it feels quieter than you would like to admit. And you can't quite name what's happening. You just know it doesn't feel the way that you thought that it would. You know, you may be saying, well, I said yes and I'm moving, so why doesn't this feel the way I expected? And so that's the real struggle. And it's more common than you think. And believe it or not, it has a name. And so here's what I want to gently say to you right now, because I think this is at the root of why this season feels so disorienting, okay? You're not confused about whether it's God. You've already settled that. What you're confused about is why the experience of saying yes and moving doesn't feel the way you expected it to feel. And the reason it doesn't match is because somewhere along the way, through the testimonies you've heard, the teachings you've sat under, the women that you've watched stepping into something that looked powerful and clear on their end, you probably absorbed a picture of what this process was supposed to look like in your mind. And that picture was built almost entirely around other people's defining moments. Their Damascus Road, their burning bush, their moment, the confirmation came and removed all their doubts and sent them forward with certainty and momentum. See, you weren't in those moments. That was theirs. You heard about them. And then something in you probably said, well, that's what it's supposed to feel like. That's the standard. That's what I'm supposed to experience when I step into my yes, when I tell God yes and I start to move. But here's what wasn't said alongside those testimonies you heard. And this is important because those moments were real for that woman, but they were a snapshot. And what didn't get talked about was almost never gets talked about is the long season of confusion and uncertainty and the am I doing this right that comes before and after. See, that part lives on the inside. No one really has language for it, so no one really talks about it. Okay, so which means you've been measuring your interior experience against a picture that was never complete. You know, and when your experience doesn't match the picture that you have in your head, you assume something is wrong, either with you or maybe what you thought you've heard or seen, but nothing is wrong. You just stepped into the part nobody really talks about. No one really describes. It's the long middle, you know, the season between the yes and the full clarity. The place where God is doing something deep and necessary inside of you, forming something, developing something, building something. And that process is not always comfortable, not always consistent, not always accompanied by the confirmations that you were expecting. Listen, calling is not designed to make you comfortable. It is designed to make you responsive. And sometimes the most important thing that can happen in this season is not a new confirmation. It's a new understanding of what the process actually feels like from the inside. I remember when I first started my journey, my process journey, I had so many starts and stops. It wasn't what I thought it was going to be like. I thought that there were going to be people that would be there to help me, that everything was just going to go well. I honestly thought that I was going to step into what God had placed in my heart and that everything was just going to work out well, that I was going to start at point A and I was going to get to Z without any problems. There won't be any hiccups. Everything was just going to be great. It was going to be fine, but it wasn't. It wasn't. I had so many starts and stops. I had so many feelings of, am I doing this right? There were so many nights that I would cry, lay out on my floor and cry because I wasn't sure if I was going the right way. I have so many journals during that season, during that time, where I would write my thoughts and my fears and everything down because I wasn't sure I was on this right path. I wasn't sure that I was doing it right. I wasn't sure if the step that I was taking was the right step. But through it all, it was a journey. It was a process. And I want to say that I share that because I don't want you to think I'm teaching this from the outside. I've been in this place. And what I know now is what I want to give you today. Okay? I want to do something practical with you right now because I think part of what's making this season so heavy for you is that you've been attaching a meaning to what you're feeling, and that meaning isn't accurate. So let me show you what I mean. Let me tell you what I mean. You may feel stretched and you may be thinking that something must be wrong. But the truth is that that stretching that you're feeling is evidence of growth, not misalignment. See, a muscle that isn't being stretched isn't being developed. And if you feel stretched right now, it means that something is actively happening in you. That's not a warning sign. It's a growth sign. So here's another one. So it feels hard, right? That's a fact. It feels hard. But you may be thinking, if it were God, it would be easier. Well, honey, here's the truth. The presence of difficulty has never been God's signal to stop. Moses didn't part the Red Sea because it was easy. And Joseph, honey, listen, he didn't become who he was meant to be without the pit and the prison first. So you have to understand that difficulty is not a detour from the calling. For many of the people of God, God used it. It was the road itself that they took. Okay? Or how about this one? You don't feel confident about which direction to go specifically, right? So you may think that I must have heard wrong or I'm moving in the wrong direction. Remember, I told you that I used to feel that way? But here's the truth. Not having full directional clarity at the start of movement is not the same as being off course. See, God rarely gives the complete map before you begin. See, he gives enough light for the next step. And if you're moving in the general direction he confirmed, well, then trust that. The specifics sharpen as you walk, not before. Here's another truth, okay? Some days the pull feels strong and other days it feels quiet, right? And you're thinking that that inconsistency might mean that you're not really hearing God. You are. Listen, the inconsistency of your experience is not the same as the inconsistency of his leading. He is steady even when your ability to perceive him fluctuates. See, a demanding season, a tired mind, a full life, these affects your reception, not his signal. He has not gone quiet. You may just need to get still enough to hear again what he's saying. And then underneath all four of those, here's one thing I want you to understand today. Just receive this today. What you're feeling is not really confusion, it's transition. And transition is supposed to feel like transition, unsettled, in between, moving but not yet arrived. That is not a sign that you're off track. That is the geography of the calling process. It is a process. And the women who make it through are not the ones who waited until it feels comfortable and clear before they keep going. They are the ones who learn to walk through the uncertainty without letting it become their answer. So there are two scriptures today that I want you to hear. I want you to, don't necessarily quote them, okay, but I want you to understand them. Exodus 3:11, right? It says, "But Moses said to God, 'Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt?'" Now this is Moses, the man who would part the Red Sea. He would lead an entire nation, and he is going to receive the 10 commandments. And his very first response when God called him wasn't confidence. It wasn't excitement. It wasn't, I've been waiting for this, God, let's go. It was a question about his own adequacy. Who am I? And I want you to notice what God did not say in response. He didn't say, "Moses, let me give you a 5-step plan." He didn't say, "Here's the full picture so you feel ready, Moses." He said, "I will be with you." And that's still the answer, my sister. When you're moving and not sure you're moving correctly, the answer isn't more clarity handed to you up front. It's the presence of the one who called you, walking with you in the going. 2 Corinthians 12:9. "But he said to me, 'My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness.'" Listen, Paul is writing about something uncomfortable and persistent that God chose not to remove. And the word that he received wasn't, "I'll make it easier for you, Paul." No, it was, "My grace is sufficient." Sufficient for what? For exactly the place that you're in, for the stretching, for the uncertainty about direction, for the gap between the confirmation that you received and the full clarity that you're still waiting on. It's his power made perfect, not after the uncertainty lifts, not once you feel more confident, but right in the middle of it, the in-between place that you're standing in right now. Listen, his grace is sufficient for that. His power is at work in that. You don't have to have it all figured out before he can use what you're already doing. So here's an exchange I want you to invite you into today. Not just to hear it, but to actually decide to put something down and then pick something else up. I want you to release, your thinking. If you're thinking like this, release it. If I were moving in the right direction, I'd feel more settled and confirmed by now. The fact that I still feel uncertain means something is off. No, that belief has been sitting on top of your movement and making it heavier than it needs to be. And that is not true. Instead, I want you to say this, receive this, that uncertainty about the specifics is not the same as being off course. I said yes, and I'm moving, and God is at work in the going, even when I can't feel it clearly. I don't need to have it all figured out to keep moving faithfully. I just need to stay close to him and trust that the clarity that I need will come through the process, not before it. Listen, that's not a declaration that you have all the answers. You know, it's a declaration that you don't need them all right now. And that is the process. That's the process that you're in. As uncomfortable and uncertain as it feels, it's exactly where God does most of his significant work in a woman of purpose. And so here's what I want you to do this week. I want you to write this out. Don't just think through it. Something shifts when it moves from your head to the page. Okay? I want you to name the expectation that hasn't been met. What specifically did you expect to feel or experience by this point in your yes? Did you expect to feel settled, confirmed, clear about the next step? Write it down specifically because you can't release an expectation that you haven't named. And then I want you to move on to naming what you did receive. Now, not what's missing, what's already there, okay? What has God already confirmed, even partially? What step have you already taken? What small thing has he already shown you? Write that down too. Because in the middle of waiting for the full picture, it's easy to miss what he's already given. And then this is the step, the next step. Take the next small action from what you already know, not from what you're still waiting on. Not the full picture, not the complete picture, but the one thing that's already in front of you. Why? Because clarity doesn't always come before movement. For many women of purpose, it comes through you walking through it. And so I want to close by saying something to you directly. And I need you to actually receive it. Please receive it. You are not off track. You are being formed. And what you're feeling, the stretching, the uncertainty about direction, the sense that you're moving but not yet arrived, that is not evidence that you've missed God or that you are doing this wrong, honey. My sister, that is what the process looks like from the inside. Okay, nobody gave you that picture before you stepped in, right? So you are the blueprint. The women you've watched step into their callings with what looked like ease and certainty, honey, they had their own version of this season, okay? Yes, they did. See, most of us didn't have the language for it while we were walking in it. And so they didn't really talk about it, which means that you've been walking through something real and valid and completely normal without anyone telling you what it was. But guess what? I'm telling you now because I've been there. I've walked it. You are in the middle, and the middle is hard, and the middle is also holy. And I wish I had words for that season that I was in so that it could help me as well. Because it is in the middle, not at the beginning when everything is fresh, and not at the end when the story makes sense. It is in the middle where God does the deepest work in a woman of purpose. And I know this, not because I read it somewhere, but because I have lived it. And I'm standing on the other side of it, telling you what it felt like. What was actually, instead of confusion, it was formation. Now, don't stop because it doesn't feel the way that you expected. I want you to keep moving. Keep moving from what you already know. Stay close to Him and trust that the clarity that you're hungry for is coming through the process and not before it. Listen, sometimes understanding the process changes the way you walk through it. I say it all the time. So go do the work. Now, I want to hear from you where you are in this right now. Have you said yes and started moving, or are you still sizing up the cost? I want you to drop it in the comments for me, okay? Now, if this series has been speaking to you in your real life, make sure that you subscribe and, have the notifications turned on because I don't want you to miss any of the other episodes. All right. So until then, keep walking in your purpose, bring forth your calling, stay faithful, my sister, and most of all, be blessed.